Ooh, wasabi guys, coming back at you with another video. It's Void here. Today I have another cool video, another top 10. This time it's going to be the best enchantments in the Commander format. These are all very good cards, but the main criteria I want to keep in mind here, a lot of these cards serve a fundamental purpose. They're not just overwhelmingly powerful, they have some sort of necessity. They're good for consistency, they're good for giving yourself advantage. They help put you in a position to win rather than just win you the game in itself. So a lot of these cards are very good, and they're also very good setup cards as well. So let's get on to some honorable mentions here. I don't do these too often, but I'm definitely going to be trying to do some of these more often because I know people ask me a lot of questions and they say, well, how come this card isn't on the list? Or how come did you forget about this card or that card? And I just wanted to be known that I didn't forget about the cards. I just chose to not put them on the list because I didn't feel like they were good enough. So let's get on here with the honorable mentions. We have Exploration and Burgeoning. Very similar cards. I would say Exploration's a little bit more consistent, both of which have a similar problem in the majority of decks that you try to put it in. If you try to put it into just a green deck, you're going to find more often than not that you're going to be running out of lands to take advantage of these cards with, and they're just meant to give you that quick start, the early head start with your land count, and just try to get ahead quicker and quicker. But usually these decks are better when taken advantage of in a deck like, say, Omnath Locus of Rage or the Gitrog Monster, something where your land drops are more or less the focus of the deck. Propaganda and Ghostly Prison, they have a similar issue of why I don't want them on this list. It's because they sort of keep your opponents from doing something, and I feel the best way to play the game is to focus on what you're doing rather than just keeping your opponents from doing something. So they're great cards and they belong in a lot of decks in this format, but to me they just get outclassed by cards that focus around card advantage and removal and, just basic fundamentals that help you win the game rather than just slowing it down. Food Chain, Necropotence, and Sneak Attack, I have them grouped here mainly because they all have a similar thing in common. They're very good in specific builds. If you have a deck that can play with them, they're incredibly powerful, and they all can in some way give you just an unholy advantage in those decks. They're good in theory, but in a lot of decks that you can't take advantage of them with, they just seem like overkill. Like, you want a deck that can play around with these cards, or else they're just not going to work out too well. Asceticism and Privileged Position are very similar to why I have the same reason for Ghostly Prison and Propaganda. They just keep your opponents from doing things rather than just trying to win the game or trying to do things to help yourself win the game. You're more or less just trying to keep your opponents from screwing with whatever you're doing, which, yeah, it's still good, it's still very powerful, but in itself it's not going to win the game more efficiently just by slowing down what your opponents are trying to do or trying to hinder what they're trying to do. Then I have the Theros gods. Notable ones here: Perforos, Iroas, and Xenagos. And these are all very noteworthy because they're also considered enchantments, and they all have a very good purpose in this format. They're good. A lot of them are also great commander options. Not enough of them I really felt were in consideration for the top 10 though, but a lot of them are very good and very noteworthy nevertheless. And then we have cards like Mind Over Matter and Omniscience, which are extremely powerful cards. They are very well known finishers in this format. Well, I don't know if Omniscience would be considered a finisher, but it puts you in a very easy to win position. I feel like these are the best case scenario cards that just by playing them you're most likely going to win. To me, that just doesn't scream fundamentally sound. It just makes it more or less just dependent around those cards. Your decks are more or less going to be dependent on winning with one or two cards rather than just being built to survive in a 4-player game, which a lot of these cards that I have on this top 10 are going to be fundamentally just good cards that are going to help you stay in the game. A lot of these cards are extremely powerful, but don't get me wrong, these are two very good cards, and you should consider them for your blue decks, but to me, I just don't think that they're consistent. They're not going to be a consistent win con. You need a lot of options, and you need a way to keep yourself going in a game. These two cards are basically just win cons, so keep that in mind as well. So let's get on to the actual list here. Number 10, I have Layline of Anticipation. very popular in combo decks in particular, as well as control decks. You want to have the advantage of timing. Being able to pick a card that you would normally just be able to cast as sorcery speed during your main phase, you have the option of timing. You get to wait till your opponent's end step to cast your spells so that you face the least amount of answers possible, and that's the best part about this card. In addition to when you open up the game with it in your hand, you get to just put it on the field there. It's also great and amazing, and it's usually going to help you win the game. But a card that has that impact early on, it's incredible. Number 9, I have Aura Shards. Just very polarizing in this format. A lot of people either love it or hate it. They think it's a ton of advantage off of just a 3-mana enchantment that sits on the field, and it's usually just specific to the creature-based decks in green-white, such as Carador, Ghost Chieftain, Gave Guru of Spores, anything where you can get a ton of ETBs off of either tokens or just creatures entering the battlefield, and also the Flicker decks in Rune of the Hidden Realms and Derevi. So you have those options there to just abuse the hell out of this card. But it is very effective, having that amount of removal just by having a creature ETB, being able to effectively say that your opponents can't have artifacts or enchantments is so powerful, and artifact and enchantment removal is so important in this format, and it just stands out, and it is very well known in this format for just doing such things as just wiping the field clear of any artifacts and enchantments that you don't want. And a lot of people either love it or hate it, but it is very powerful. Number 8, I have Doubling Season. Another card that is also very polarizing. A lot of people either love it or hate it. They think it's too powerful, especially when we had Atraxa coming out last year. Price spiked, and everybody they were just focusing all on +1/+1 counters and any way to take advantage of planeswalker counters, loyalty counters, any sort of interaction with counters. And this is one of those cards that always comes into mind. It's an auto-include. Whether it is combo decks like Gave Guru of Spores, or any creature-based deck that deals with +1/+1 counters, or any deck that deals with tokens, as well as just the Planeswalker Super Friends deck that usually use it as a way to ult their Planeswalkers early on and just get a ton of advantage. So it is a combo card, but it's also just a good quality card to play in any deck that has any synergies at all with tokens and +1/+1 counters or counters in general. So it's usually referenced whenever talking about anything that doubles counters or tokens in general. But it's just a very well-known card, and its presence is also very well-known in this format. And it is an auto-include in a lot of these decks. Number 7, I have Dictate of Erebos, barely taking the spot away from Grave Pact, but I feel that it is very important to state that Grave Pact effects are so important for this format. I don't think enough people realize that these cards are just fundamentally great. We typically see a ton of indestructible haste and shroud creatures in this format with very few ways to deal with them, but then you throw in something like a Grave Pact effect, or in this case it's Dictate of Erebos, and you have easy ways to deal with Voltron commanders. You have easy ways to deal with indestructibles, things that you would normally have a difficult time dealing with. I prefer Dictate over Grave Pact itself because of the whole fact that it has flash. And timing is so powerful. It is 1 mana more expensive than Grave Pact, but it also has the benefit of it's only 2 black mana, but it also has the flash, so you have the timing on your side there. So you could do this in response to, say, declaring blockers, and suddenly just punish your opponents for trying to overextend with their attacks, trying to remove all your creatures. In response, you play a Dictate of Erebos, and they get punished for it. So it's a very good card. It's a very well-designed card, and the whole Grave Pact effects are very important for this format, and I still don't think there are enough cards that do this. You have the creatures like Fleshbag Marauder that enter the battlefield and force each player to sacrifice a creature. This is the enchantment form that's a lot more efficient and a lot more capable of doing a lot more damage. Number 6 is Phyrexian Arena. I don't know why people always underestimate the power of just getting an extra card draw each upkeep, but that's what it is. It's basically a one-sided Howling Mine. You get all the advantage there just for paying 1 life during your upkeep. You get to draw that extra card. It's in black. It's pretty much a staple in black. No matter what deck it really is, I mean, unless it's 4 color, 5 color, there's very few reasons to not consider this card. I mean, people love Howling Mine, people love any sort of effect that allows you to draw cards, but usually when you can just guarantee yourself that extra card draw, it's not a huge target. I mean, I see it all the time in games. Someone plays a Phyrexian Arena, and it usually just gets left alone because they don't really care. They say, oh, you're just drawing an extra card, but over the course of a game that's, 10 turns into the game, you're drawing 10 extra cards that you shouldn't have drawn because people underestimate the power of a 3-mana enchantment. It all adds up. The little things add up and they turn into big things, and that's exactly what Phyrexian Arena is. It's a smaller target than a card like Necropotence, but yet it gives you a very similar advantage. It's not as flashy, it's not as big, it's not going to satisfy the Timmy players out there, but it's going to give you more consistency. And that's really important. Number 5, I have Muraris Wake. It is an auto-include in literally every deck that is playing green and white. There is no reason to not play this card. It is an Anthem in combination with a Cage Sun-like ability. It's even better because it doubles the amount of mana produced by any land. So lands that produce colorless mana produce 2 colorless mana. So you have that advantage of getting just about any mana you need. On top of the whole Anthem, which is quite frankly the least great thing about it, but it's still awesome. It's a 5-mana enchantment that once you get it out, it helps you win the game. It helps put you in the best possible position to win the game, because more mana means more options, more things that you can do during the game. And just as Cage Sun, Gauntlet of Power, Extraplanar Lens, those types of mana doublers are important for monocolored decks in order for them to win, in order for them to put themselves in a great position, Muraris Wake is just as important, if not more so, for multicolored decks that are playing Celestia colors. Think of Bant decks, think of Absent decks, think of 5-color decks. These are all decks that can play this card and should play this card. No matter what the strategy is, no matter how you win, this card is going to help you win even more consistently than you would have before without it. So it's a no-brainer for me. Number 4 is Land Tax, one of the most iconic cards in the game, period. But when it comes to enchantments, it's yet another card. It adds up during the game, whether you realize it or not, but you play this early on, when not a lot of people, they may not view you as a threat. This is one of those cards that it makes such a big difference. Whenever you have that disadvantage during the game, and you can easily get back into the game by adding 3 basic lands to your hand. Not enough can be said for having your land drops when you need them, or getting them consistently. Not only that, but I know a lot of people may not think that deck thinning is a factor in this format, but it really is. Making your deck more consistent, making it so that you're drawing your answers, you're not drawing lands that you don't need. It helps you get back into games that you shouldn't normally be into because you're not playing enough lands. Well, you can get away with not playing enough lands because land tax bails you out of that situation. It helps you search up the lands that you need so you can get the mana fixing you need also. That's another underrated fact about it, is that you get the 3 different lands there. It's not 3 of any specific type there. It's just 3 of the lands. It's just 3 basic lands. So you can search up enough mana fixing that you need, and you get 3 lands. So you can ensure yourself that for the next 3 turns, including this one, I'm not going to get screwed out of mana here. I'm not going to get screwed out of missing a land drop. Very underrated, but yet one of those cards that is just so fundamentally sound. It gets underrated just because it's not one of the flashiest cards. But nevertheless, it's still a very powerful card. Number 3 is Sylvan Library. To me, an auto-include in every single green deck. You have the ability to manipulate it, and there are decks that can abuse it and take advantage of the number of cards that you draw off of it. You can double that number with cards like Thought Reflection, and there are ways to get more off of it. But it is not just the best card draw in green that we have, it's also one of the best card draw enchantments, period. For just the 2 mana there in green, you have something that allows you to draw more cards than you normally would, and it gives you the option of keeping those cards. just at the cost of life, which in the format you start off with 40. There are ways that you're going to sacrifice the life if it means you get more advantage, if it means you draw into your answers, if it means you draw into your combo pieces. You're going to give up that life. But it also works as a way of fixing your draw step, fixing the cards that you're going to be drawing, so that you get to look 3 cards deep and you get to choose the card that you absolutely want the most if you don't want to lose any life at all. So it's just a great card, fundamentally just important for a lot of decks that play green, and so many decks in this format, period. Number 2, I have Survival of the Fittest. Now, I felt bad putting this card on this list because many players just don't think it's that fun. It is a very powerful card, but it serves a purpose for so many creature-based decks. It is a creature tutor. It offers you that precision. It offers you the ability to dump creatures into your graveyard at the same time, so it synergizes perfectly with decks like Carador, with decks like Mimeoplasm, with other graveyard-based decks like Marin, so that you have options in your graveyard. It also tutors up creatures from your deck to your hand. It is easy to win the game off of a card like this, incredibly. However, I don't typically view this card as a one-card win. It is one of the best setup cards in this format, if not the best. You have so many options in decks that aren't associated with the graveyard in any way to win games. You have decks that are just creature based in general, such as Animar, that absolutely just love this card. It offers you precision, it offers you a way to get to your answers, it offers you a way to get to your combo creatures. There are a ton of ways that you can win the game with a card like this, and it just sets you up perfectly to do so. And it's just a great enchantment. It's just so well known in this format. It's just a very powerful card in general, and that's why it's here on this list at number 2. Number 1, I have Ristic Study. And before I go off here and say that it's a card draw enchantment, it's all about getting as much card draw as you can, it really isn't as much of a card draw enchantment as you might think it is. And if you go into games thinking that it's going to draw you a ton, you're sadly going to be just disappointed every single time. It has the potential to give you a ton of card draw, but also you have to go into this thinking this card is all about politics in this game. One of the aspects about Commander that goes unappreciated for many players and many play groups is its ability to engage players in a game where you actually use critical thinking, where you have to solve problems with other players, where you have to compromise, where you have to form a temporary alliance with other players. And this card is one of those best cards that allows you to do that. You can basically look at players and bargain with them and say, okay, I'm going to let you draw this card, but in return, I don't want you to attack me, or I don't want you to remove my things, or I don't want you to engage with me in a negative way during this game, at least until we're the last 2 ones left. So that's what this card does. It's very political, and there are players that misplay. I mean, there's obvious times where you just tap out and you pay the extra mana in order to ensure someone doesn't get that extra card draw, but so many players just underestimate this. They either don't think that you can win with that extra card draw, or they just think it's irrelevant altogether. They just think that they're capable of winning in a way that gets around whatever card draw you get off of Ristic Study. So it benefits you if your play group is overall just ignorant of the card and they just don't understand the importance of card advantage in the format. But this card is very political, and that's why I love it. That's why, to me, it's the best enchantment in the format, because every blue deck can play it. Not every blue deck does. Some people have their feelings about this card. They think it's annoying. They think it's oppressive. I personally love it because it engages players in a game of politics. It engages players in a game where you have to talk to people. You know, you have to think about your decisions every time you play a spell, whether or not is this going to benefit me, or is this going to benefit the whole game altogether? Is this going to allow me to stay in the game if I let him get that extra card draw? So that's why it's number 1. But anyway, guys, this was just my opinion. This was just my list here. Let me know what you think are the 10 best enchantments in the format. But anyway, guys, you have a wonderful day. Void here, signing off.